April through my wife, who was taking her course, and said, "You absolutely need to try this and come to it." Both of us are either we are or have a long history in sales, and that's how we make our living, basically, in one way, shape, or another. It always ladders through that space. And she said, "This is going to be great from that perspective." And then I joined the group and learned we did very little about sales uh, development, or I would say skills, although that was a deep part of the training. Really, what it was to me and many others, and there was many from our cohort that we still occasionally get together and talk.
Mhm.
But the reality is that just about everyone has some sort of, I call it the burr underneath the blanket or the saddle that needs to be removed. And it's just something that bothers or prevents you from moving forward or becoming more than what you already are. Oftentimes we know what that is and we just live in a lot of denial, or maybe we're unaware of it. But April had a great effect on everyone in the room, on not just, hey, here's a great way of learning how to up your game on sales, but also literally removing that thorn from a whole group of people. So it was unlike most coaching that I've ever been through. Um, some days it felt like therapy, to be completely candid with you. Some days it felt very, very good. Most days it felt very, very good, and learned a great deal from it all. So I'm a big fan, and I still come back to many of the things that we've talked about in our sessions, and learned and apply on a day-to-day basis. So it was one of those things for me that was very eye-opening and something that just stuck. I can't say that about all the sort of training that I go through, or in fact that I deliver. So now that I'm a trainer myself, so, and a coach.
And I'm so excited that you have just really used your gifting to step into a place that, when we first met, you didn't quite imagine yet, right?
Ah, that's true. I was not thinking of myself as going into any kind of a coaching role and teaching others or whatever the case was. I mean, not like long term. I suppose my dream was I wanted to.
No, no, not again. We're going to believe that his internet's going to come right back in. Bill is right there. Now we got you again. You
Sorry
froze
about
for
that.
just a minute. So say that last part again.
Yeah, so I never imagined that I would be in a coaching role, and it just happened to be a serendipitous thing that took place, and I really, really enjoy that position. I take a lot of the lessons that I learned with you and in the class that we were in, and use them in my own way, kind of putting my own spin on them. But it is something that I would absolutely suggest people go into, and not go into it with the mindset that, oh, we're going to be in there learning a new sales sort of model or framework or whatever the case is, because that is part of it, but that's a small part of what you're going to experience.
And I love what you're talking about. So the Masters League competition was the program that you came into, and that is something we still offer. It's actually on a brand new platform, so it's much more user friendly online now. Luckily, we had moved online before the COVID hit, and we've been refining it every program. We're about 3 years into it now. You were in, I think, the second group, and I love that you are all still connected. And you're right, the group really forms a community and creates relationships that you can carry on, because it, and I purposely remind people that I am not a therapist. I'm not a counselor. And yet when we're digging into layers, which is what we do, because when we show up to business, our who we are shows up, right? And if there's life happening, as you said, the thorn, I love the way you present it. And you've been through, as you mentioned, multiple executive leadership positions, executive leadership training, coaching, etc. And so you were a tad bit resistant when we got to get connected with each other. and for other people, what would you say really hit home for you to really see another perspective and dive in?
I would say to you that you have a very unique gift,
Thank you.
in being able to connect with the person in a vulnerable state very, very quickly. One of the key things that I always remember you doing is, do I have permission? May I have permission? You literally ask somebody to get into their life or into their world, and what I would call into their mess. And that's one of the most critical things that a person can do in establishing trust, but also it's also like an overt invitation to say, I'm not just interested in like getting my work done as April and like what I'm contractually bound to do for the course, whatever the case is. I'm actually interested in you as a person, and therein lies a differentiation. So I understand why you put the boundaries out there and say, I'm not really your therapist. But the other part of that is that we're dealing with human beings. And a lot of times when you're in executive positions or coaching people who are executives, one of the things that happens is that they get stuck into a position of saying, well, I've become successful because of what I've done. And they never think of why. And maybe they think of how, but they never think of the why that put them on that course of action. So what they do is they focus on what and how they do their work. And then they become almost mechanized to kind of transpose that and stamp that on everyone else around them. And so that's like the contemporary directive style of leading and whatnot in corporate America or any small business, to be transparent about that. And what happens is that it makes organizations much less nimble, and it also makes them allergic to change.
Mm-hmm.
So if change happens, invariably what people will do is they'll migrate to a space of, well, we must look at it through my lens if I happen to be the boss, and we must attack the problem the very same way. And so there have been organizations through time, and a good example would be Microsoft, where they were incredibly innovative for some time, and then they had developed all these silos and this hierarchy, and this is how we got here. And they got a new CEO who came in and basically looked at the system and said, we got to break this down. We got to create coaches as an innovative tool and a part of our culture, because we have engineers who literally are outmoded. They're outdated because the language of coding has changed, and they refuse to advance with the changes that we see around us. So that's not just in technology. That doesn't just happen at a .com or a software manufacturing place or anything. It happens in all businesses. Mm-hmm. So being able to have that flexibility and understand that simple concepts like what got me here is not going to get me where I need to go. And then really having an introspective look at yourself to say, what are the thorns that are scary that prevent me from, coming out and being at least 80% of who I am or 70% of who I am on a day-to-day basis is one of those rare gifts that if you ever come upon it, is a great learning. It's a great understanding of self. And so I think that that's one of the biggest takeaways that I have to say in regards to what I've learned and experienced with you.
And Bill, one of the gifts any leader gets to experience is when a leader takes what they learned and goes and implements it and shares it and grows others from it. And you've gone and done that. And it's exciting to watch. It's exciting to hear. And it's a growth process, as you know, right?
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. And I oftentimes will look at leaders. My job, by the way, is to literally do leadership coaching of people who are 2 to 3 to 4 levels above me. And so besides the fact that that's a little bit terrifying at times.
The whole process.
Yeah. But you really do have to confront these vulnerabilities that they will not want to take a look at, because their safe zone has been something other than addressing those pieces. But that's precisely what's holding them back from even advancing more. And those are important characteristics to have leaders understand and at least acknowledge that, hey, this is a space that I'm not great at, or that causes me fear. Now, on the other hand, I'm a huge believer in strengths finders and, just focusing on what people are great at. So I also have the fundamental belief that if you are horrible at administrative tasks, or whatever that happens to be, the very last thing that I'm going to do as a leader is try to focus on that to make you great at it. So said differently, I mean, I will never be an NFL player, but if somebody wanted to invest the time and money in getting me into shape to be in the NFL, I might be able to ride a bench as a sort of sideline, I don't know, philosopher. Who knows the best I
I
could do.
love that.
But
You
but
got all the vocabulary for it.
the reality is I'm not built for that job. So why would we ever want to do that? I use the metaphor with my leaders that who's the best player that used to be on the New England Patriots, and it was Tom Brady. And I would say, well, by that thinking, then why wouldn't Bill Belichick put him as a defensive end? And have him play both ways. Well, you would never do that because it's not fit for his purpose. So even though he's the most, a valuable player on their team and knows the game and all of that, it's out of his space. So there's something to be said about blending these things, about like looking into the vulnerabilities of people, making sure those aren't harming them, first of all, and coaching them so that if they are harming them, they aren't doing that anymore. And then if they're truly things that are holding them back from achieving the great things that they could where they have strengths, really addressing that problem fully and getting them into a more comfortable space with it all.
And you lead that perfectly into, and I'm sure you might remember the Habit Finder assessment that you got to walk through with me, and the natural genius and all the materials that went with that material. And we wholeheartedly believe in that team development process and leadership development and that natural genius and where that natural genius lies and how our stories and experiences pull us away from that. And so that would be my final question to you. And I think it's an amazing awareness of the journey you've been on to discover as well as self-develop, and then allow people in your life to do that and to honor them and that time to share that. Thank you for taking the time. The final question is, in all the perceptions you've had to overcome, what do you think has been the biggest perception you've overcome and that you work on diligently as well as inspire others to do so?
I think that it's philosophical more than it is a single thing. So that's an interesting question. But what I would say is that we have a natural tendency as human beings to shy away from that which hurts us or causes a pain, psychological pain, physical pain, whatever that happens to be. When you get into a job, that is the haunting part of the job, and so instead of actually going into the dark to figure out what is going on in there and bringing light into it all and understanding it, we tend to shut the door on it and ignore it. And we'll ignore that as long as we can. And one of a few things happens. A, you either kind of level out and you never advance beyond that point because somebody says, in the line of command, they don't have any more upside.
Mm-hmm.
B, you quit the process because it's like, okay, I don't have job satisfaction, or I don't like what's going on. I don't quite understand why, but I just don't like it. And C, probably the worst thing is people get stuck and they refuse to leave or refuse to address it, and then they kind of live a life that is almost like a life in limbo is the best I would say to it all. So I'm always wary of people who happen to stay in a single role for like 15 and 20 years. And they've done that one thing for that entire time, and they're a subject matter expert. And I always look at it and say, okay, so why did they stay? And there's only one real acceptable answer for me, which is I am so passionate about what I am doing. This is all I ever want to do. And I look for ways of honing my edge. Now that person is very special. And I really want to protect that person and help them hone their edge. The others are, this is a safe job. And it's where I feel safe here. And the moment I hear that, it's like it blows me back a bit. And I go, okay, wait a minute. There's something that we need to investigate and figure out differently. Because the one sure thing I know about life, and we're living through this right now, is that change is a constant. it is always changing. And the irony is that nobody believes change is always happening. And so you get caught in it, and life moves on, time moves on, technology, whatever, markets move on, whatever the case is. And you find yourself going from one day to the next of having to connect to a human being via Zoom. And you and I have had problems this morning. And to be candid with you, I thought I was a Zoom expert up until today. And
We learned.
yeah, seriously, I was thinking to myself, this could happen to me whenever I'm on April's side of trying to get a deliverable done, and then what, right?
Mhm.
And we have digital producers and we have technologists and all this that are helping us along the way, but this is something that would have delayed me and would have tripped me up too. So that unknown and how is always changing, and so to think that life is stable is in and of itself kind of a misnomer.
Mhm.
And so my key takeaway, I guess, having gone through all this and what I learned about myself was to kind of change my perspective on what I think when things are changing, which
Mm.
is instead of, okay, I've got to have the mindset of what are the, what am I protecting against losing versus what am I um, looking for to gain. So that subtle change, and those are the two modes of operation that happen. Um, that subtle change of instead of looking at what I'm protecting, focusing on what I could potentially gain through change has been a big game changer for me. Because I always work towards, when you met me, I always work towards the idea of I've got to optimize things and I've got to make things fantastic and whatever the case is, which is de facto saying I'm working to protect the status quo against what can I gain because the market is a little shaky or the market has changed up or whatever the case is, which was a little scary for me because I had made a life of the latter. And I know now, I mean, as a good example of it now is that as we are in this virtual world, I've been working, as I've mentioned, since February from home
Mhm.
and having to connect effectively with people via a teleconference. And it's something that we did prior to this, but it wasn't, it wasn't the only thing we could do. We had a lot of face to face and all of that. So just that alone has been a space where I have developed a lot of ways and methodologies of using this as an advantage. And inside of our company, instead of saying, my God, how long are we going to be here and what can we forecast? And by the way, that's a huge thing. I've been on a number of think tanks that are outside of my organization where I volunteered for them to figure out how
Smart.
businesses are approaching COVID. And one of the fascinating things is that they all want to be able to forecast,
Mm.
and you can't.
Mm-mm.
So the key there is, what are you doing today to save the day? And it turns out the future is the addition of all the things you do on a day-to-day basis.
Truth.
So if you resolve back to your values and keep those center, then the future kind of takes care of itself.
That is something I've been working to teach for a long time, including to myself on days. Yet the gift and anything else you want to make sure you share with our audience today. As I shared with you, I knew your voice and your message would have an impact on those that are listening. You've also been very purposeful about who you serve and keeping the balance of who you serve. And I want to remind you the joy of that celebration moment that you get.
Yeah.
And that smile told me a whole bunch there.
It's very exciting when you can capture somebody in a space and then in a way kind of shock them into awareness of hey, I've got a lot more to go. And so I had a team last week, the leadership team that I was working with about a week or so ago. And we were working on a vision statement and we were doing these sticky things on a Jamboard, and they're coming up with these really, really like low, bland type of descriptors.
Mm.
And they're a very humble team, which I dearly, dearly appreciate. I think humility and humbleness is an incredible talent and art. And I stopped them and I said, wait a minute, you guys are greater than this. You know, we spent a lot of time together, and so I'm asking you to spread your wings a bit and be grateful, quite honestly, that you have the capabilities that you do. But let's talk about those so that we fully, you know, kind of include that with where you want to go and be on purpose because of that. So that when those moments happen and people are like, you know, you're right. I do have these things that I can do great, and it's wonderful to be part of that.
And you've got an amazing family that's living that out as well.
Oh yeah, I'm very fortunate. My wife is, as I always say, she's always kind of like the pithy, wise person in my life, and I've learned if there's ever been a teacher, it has been her. And I died laughing maybe 2 weeks ago about COVID with her because she came in her own way. She reminds me of the character on Dances with Wolf. The woman stands with the fist. Because when she gets frustrated or angry, she will tell you precisely what is on her mind. And so she was working with one of the local chambers here, and they were asking them, well, how can we help your business? And she said, you know, we're completely done with all the in the box solutions. You know, we've done all those. Everyone's done all the in the box stuff. So we need everyone to start thinking out of the box because this is not going away. And the in the box solutions are getting me 60% of what I used to be able to sell through my business. So how are we going to move outside of that? And those voices that come out of desperation and of thinking objectively about a subject are so very important in utilizing in any level of business. So that's you know, that's one of those things that I listen to hear. All of our kids are doing well, although they hate being in lockdown. They're all way smarter than I will ever be. One kid took, and I say this not because I'm prideful, but I'm amazed. He took 5 AP classes and had to do most of the AP classes towards the end in COVID, including the testing. And he scored a 5 on his calc and 4s on the rest of them.
Powerful.
I was, you know, dumbfounded that he did this. And then in his job, he has a job as a lifeguard here locally at the water park, and when they're open, he is a lifeguard, and he has already this year saved a couple of people from drowning, which is, and he walks around thinking it's just like his job, and you have to kind of pull it out of him. But he was like, yeah, I saved a man who was underwater yesterday, Dad. And like, dude, you need to tell me about these things. That's like pretty remarkable. But it just puts everything in perspective that, you know, we all play different roles and different parts, and you can learn from everyone. So.
And what a wonderful example of that. Thank you again for taking the time. And
thank you, April.
Genetec is gifted with your presence and your experience and your ability to take every bit of all the journeys you've been on and continue to grow and develop it in your own unique way. It's powerful. Never mind the beautiful family that you are also gifting and sharing that with. You're looking for that opportunity to serve, and you're doing it every day, and it's obvious.
Well, thank you. And I'm very fortunate and very grateful to have crossed paths with you.
Same here.
It was one of those times that was engram is what I meant to say, is that it's something that's stamped in my head, and was like a pivotal time. So I would suggest for people who are questioning what they would get out of this, take it, throw yourself into it, and be honest about it, and you're going to get a whole bunch out of it. And
you're a living example of that, sir.
So
sending you a big old hug in the midst of the time that we can, a virtual hug.
Got you, yeah.
And I look forward to giving you both one and your family as we're able to cross paths again.
You bet.
Thank you, sir. Have an amazing weekend.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.